Here's something I've been curious about. How Witch of the Black Forest and Lady of Faith come together and create Musician King. In fact, much of the exact process and intricacies of fusion are a mystery, starting with the titular card, Fusion, or the English translation, Polymerization. But what is polymerization? Cram and Hammond define polymerization as reactions in which small molecules, monomers, react with one another to form larger molecules, polymers. And there is a bit of merit to this definition when looking at the artwork for the card Non-Fusion Area, where small molecules are being bound in mesh and prevented from coming together to form polymers. The card Polymerization is probably a better source of information. And let's take a look at my copy from Legend of Blue Eyes. Fuses 2 or more fusion material monsters to form a new fusion monster, which is very flavorful but doesn't really explain the endgame mechanics of a fusion summon. Specifically that fusion material monsters are sent from the hand or field to the graveyard in order to perform a fusion summon. This is expensive in terms of card advantage because it takes at least 3 cards to bring out one fusion monster. Although it can afford a good amount of tempo since it does not require on-field resources. This large tempo push is the reason that fusion monsters could not attack the turn they were summoned in the Bottle City arc. Card advantage for tempo is an interesting trade-off, but the real beauty of the fusion mechanic is in the fusion deck, in my opinion. Having a small deck of useful monsters which do not have to be drawn, but are a little difficult to access is a pretty elegant solution to the problem of having to run situationally dead cards. For comparison, in Magic, the double-faced meld cards join together to create a new creature, although this concept is not developed very far, being a parasitic mechanic and probably not one which will return until Emrakul influences another plane. I do want to point out that the Bandai game did something similar with this big Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon card. But that card uses Wicked Chain, not Polymerization, and can attack 8 times consecutively, which might still be overkill in today's game. Interestingly enough, the Max Summon from Rush Duels also seems to return to this design space. In Hearthstone, Thaddeus is another take on this concept, summoned upon the death of Rostan and Stalag, taking advantage of Hearthstone being a digital card game, in which Thaddeus could be generated instead of having to be run in the deck. But these are extremely specific examples, while fusion in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is much broader. Some monsters require specific material, like Humanoid Wormdrake, which requires Humanoid Slime and Wormdrake, as the name would imply. And the artwork clearly shows the influence of both monsters. The body type of Wormdrake is preserved, the crest and spike on the head with the eyes situated between them, and the red orbs along the body. These orbs have been turned purple, which is likely due to a color contribution of Humanoid Slime, which had blue orbs in its artwork. The slime also influences the body structure, with the characteristic 3-fingered hand on one side and the sickle on the other arm. A few of the card's non-aesthetic features also carry over. The attribute, type, and defense points from Humanoid Slime, but the attack points is the sum of the 2 fusion monsters. Humanoid Wormdrake is probably one of the most intuitive fusion monsters. But let's go back to the Musician King for a moment. The materials do not really match up with the fusion monster, and I sorta have a theory on this one. Back in Forbidden Memories, the fusion system was a lot looser, where there were not specifically listed materials, but vague categories of monsters that, when combined, would form fusion monsters if several conditions were met. The categories of fusion materials for Musician King are a female and a fairy monster, and you might assume that Witch of the Black Forest is the female and Lady of Faith is the fairy, but even in Forbidden Memories, both monsters are spellcasters. This might be poor regionalization though. Perhaps the word witch in Witch of the Black Forest is a poor translation, like with Dark Witch and Duname's Dark Witch, which are more accurately translated as Valkyrie and Duname's Valkyrie, making their fairy typing more comprehensible. It gets weirder when we look at the metal morphed version from the anime. But the anime opens its own can of worms, with weird cards like Neospatian Marine Dolphin, which does not have fusion materials and requires the spell Nex instead. Or in the original Duel Monsters, when Yugi uses Spell-Shattering Arrow, Polymerization, and Mammoth Graveyard to fuse with Seto's Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, sort of MacGyvering his own super polymerization. At least Yugi had some more typical fusion monsters, like Gaia Dragon Champion, which is Gaia the Fierce Knight, riding Curse of Dragon. But wait a minute, Darkblade also rides dragons like Kiryu, for example, as seen in the art for Formation Union, utilizing the awkward Union mechanic. Pitch Dark Dragon is another dragon Darkblade can ride, like in the artwork for Frontline Base. But then there is also this fusion monster, Darkblade the Dragon Knight, and it just makes you wonder, why retread the same design space with Union monsters? And does the Union mechanic add any benefit, whether flavorful or tactical?